All right, guys, we're getting ready to read chapter 8. Again, a little bit more background so we can kind of picture what's going on. Um, again, we're still talking about Rick and Cracker and his buddies and their teams being trained um, at Fort Benning. And we looked at, in the previous chapters, I showed you a video clip of um, and this was a video clip I showed you of a sergeant or some officer teaching about something called booby traps. Um, and and it seems like a funny um, kind of title, although there's nothing really funny about any type of war. But the main purpose of talking about what they are is understanding that they are the types of traps that um, are set up to seriously injure men. And I told you that some of these traps were so intense and so scary that they actually were a big cause and seriously added to a lot of the fear that the men had. Um, their PTSD during the war. They were seriously scared to death of these traps. And I told you that one of the big reason for these types of traps was that they weren't fighting an actual marked army, an enemy that wore a uniform. And I used the example of if you're playing a sport, like if you're playing football or if you're playing basketball, you usually it's easy to tell who's on what team, even though you know your buddies. Like if you're practicing, if it's like um, you're practicing and you'll even practice during a scrimmage, you'll do shirts and skins or you'll do those practice shirts that you put over your jerseys where one of you'll have the home team color and they're reversible and the other will have like one will be blue, one team will be blue and one will be white, so you can focus on who's on which team. But with this type of warfare where they use these booby traps, it's called guerrilla warfare. You don't know who the enemy is because they use a lot of civilians. It's like a militia type of warfare. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about um, this kind of warfare, um, this guerrilla warfare, it was known as. And this goes into explanation. There was throughout history, there's all different types of guerrilla warfare, but it just simply is non-traditional. Non-traditional. So let's look at this little short clip.
In this history illustrated video, we're going to take a look at the vocabulary word guerrilla warfare. Now, guerrilla warfare is a style of fighting or certain tactics, things that they do to help them win. Now, guerrilla warfare normally consists of a military that is composed of irregulars or civilians. It's not an actual real army, so I'm going to put civilians here as well. So these are the types of things you would see consisting of a guerrilla warfare army, similar to a militia. Now, some of the strategies they would do would be non-traditional or non-normal. So I'm going to put non-traditional, which means they're not normal. It's not a normal type of army that they're going to be using different tactics than a normal army. So, for example, here I'm going to show you some guys walking down a road. Let's say there's a guy hiding behind a tree and he is thinking about attacking him. This would be an ambush. If he sneaks around and he attacks them from behind without them knowing, this is called an ambush. That is one major tactic. You see here, tactics. That's a style that they would use to try to make sure that they can win the war. You see, guerrilla warfare normally consists of a small group of people versus a large group of people. So they use strategies that will help them win the war. So some other strategies might be sabotage. They might sneak in at night and destroy equipment that you need, or raids. They would just show up and take everything that you got if they know that you're not there and paying attention to it. So these strategies help a small group of members help to beat a large more organized army. Hey, if you like the video you just watched, please click.
Okay, so when he was talking about civilians, a civilian is just exactly what you think it is. A civilian is what you and I are. They're non-military members. They are just citizens of a country that are used. And this is what Vietnam was, guerrilla warfare. So you're fighting, and they don't really, and this sabotage, these raids, they don't follow the rules of war. And this is one of the things that the American soldiers really, really fought against in the Vietnam War that they hadn't really seen before. And as I say, I'm not that familiar with the situation in the Korean War, and maybe some of you are. You could do some research, but Americans seemed to be like they were going in to help because they were trying to stop the spread of communism. They wanted democratic governments where the people have a say, have a voice in their government. They don't want they were trying to stop where one group of powerful people would control the military, would control everybody else. The government control is not the American ideology. We're a democratic republic. That means we're not just, we're controlled by the people. The government is by the people, for the people. But anyway, so we're seen as the good guy. Well, the good guy, even though you're fighting an enemy that doesn't follow the rules, when the good guy slips up, when the guy that's supposed to be helping um, doesn't follow the rules or makes a mistake, they really get pounded. But when the bad guy does something bad, the attitude is like, oh, well, that's the bad guy. Of course, they're going to do something wrong. But when the good guy makes a mistake, when the Americans made a mistake, when they slipped up, um, there was a lot of propaganda. There was a lot of press because there was a lot of opposition. There was a lot of people who didn't want us involved in the war. And so that would be like the preacher. If the preacher makes a mistake, if the preacher commits a sin or does something wrong, oh my, that's terrible because he's a preacher, so he's supposed to be perfect. If the teacher misspells a word, if the teacher uses poor grammar, oh my, that's terrible because the teacher is supposed to know everything because they're a teacher. But in reality, human beings are all fallible. We all make mistakes. So when the Americans went in there were in the past, there were traditions, there were rules of war. When you captured an enemy soldier, there was rules about how you treated that soldier. When you were fighting a battle, there were rules about during that battle what you did and how you behaved. Now, did everybody always follow those rules? No. But if it was found out that you didn't, you could be punished. You could be court-martialed, they call it. But during guerrilla warfare and these types of things, it was no holds barred. It was people didn't follow the rules because they weren't members of an organized army that was held to any rules. And again, this is the same way, in the Middle East with our soldiers now that are fighting in the Middle East and Afghanistan and different places. They're not fighting an organized, I mean, they're organized in one sense, but they're not an army that observes rules. They're not an army that's honor bound to a country and pride and respect and patriotism. They're just out to accomplish whatever they're out to accomplish. So this was something that the Americans fought all the time. So these booby traps, these underhanded techniques, there was so much unsurety that it drove the guys crazy. So that's what these war dogs, these like Cracker, these teams like Cracker and Rick were so important and essential during the Vietnam War because even more so than in the past, because the jungles that these men fought in, there were no jungles in America. They were so unused to it, and it was so different than anything they'd ever known before. So, and it was very stressful for the guys. So they were very, very important. And it was very important that these dog teams be very good because they saved countless lives. These dogs did. All right, chapter 8. Once it got fun, training passed quickly. One rainy day during formation, Cracker could see uncertainty in the air. Her paws sank into the mud. Usually Rick didn't make her stand out in such hard rain for so long. She kept looking up at him, waiting for him to take her away, but he didn't move. He seemed funny today, not exactly, not sad exactly, and not scared. more like uncertain, like he didn't know what was going to happen next. And he always knew what was going to happen next. What happened tomorrow was just about exactly the same thing that happened the day before. So, what was there to be uncertain about? She looked up at him again. She was so wet, it was hard to see. It was the last day of class, and the 24 men of the 67th Infantry Platoon, Scout Dog, stood at attention with their dogs. Rain poured. Rick saw Sarge hold a couple of cheap trophies in his hands and felt a twinge of pride and anticipation. The last weeks of training had gone perfectly as far as Rick was concerned. He and Cracker had not made a single error. This rain is nothing, said the sergeant to the men. Get used to it, he said. This is nothing. Whenever any hardship occurred, he held up the trophies, which were about the size of cans of beer. Willis, trophy for first place. Butler second. Cody and 2020 stepped forward to get their trophies. As Rick felt his face grow hot, U-Haul looked at him. Not a bad job, Hansky. So that was going to be Rick's only trophy, getting his name pronounced correctly for once. U-Haul didn't talk long. The rain drenched his face and clothes as he addressed the platoon. Rick had never seen him so sober. The most memorable line of the day was some graffiti U-Haul quoted. Join the army, meet interesting people, then kill them, he said. That's what it all comes down to, men. See you in a month. What did a trophy mean? Rick could have made one in his dad's tool shop that looked twice as good as the ones Cody and 2020 got. But he felt his confidence wane. He really wanted one of those trophies. His confidence returned as he packed his bag for leave, and thought of Cracker the whole time. His new closeness to Cracker made him feel that it was still possible to whip the world. It was just that maybe doing so was going to be a lot harder than he thought. How much harder was the important issue? He looked up and saw Cody standing beside him. We're going to make it back safe, Cody said. You got a great dog. Get out of my head, you mind-reading freak. Cody laughed. You don't need to be a freak to read your simple mind. Then he added seriously, we're going to make it. I know it. Cody really was the most optimistic guy in the world. Rick pushed himself up and stuck out his hand. The two men shook. Cody started to walk away, and Rick called out, Cody. Cody turned around. Yeah? I'll be watching your back at Nam. Cody grinned. Likewise. Rick went out in the rain, fell to his knees, and did something he rarely did. He prayed. He prayed that all 24 soldiers of the 67th IPSD would be DROSed in one piece. He prayed for the guys who, though through bad luck, had been teamed up with so-so dogs. Of course, not so long ago, he thought he was one of those guys. He'd heard whooping and turned around to see Cody in 2020 descending on him. You think praying is going to save you from Vietnam? Shouted Cody. Cody in 2020 picked up Rick and threw him into the mud. Rick picked Cody up and threw him into the mud. I don't see need no trophy to tell me Cracker and I are going to be the best dog team in Vietnam, Rick cried out. In your dreams, Cody cried back. Dream on.